We begin tonight in Abuja, where President Bola Tinubu has formally sworn in Professor Joash Amokuta, a senior advocate of Nigeria, as the new chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC. The swearing-in ceremony took place at the presidential villa in Abuja during a meeting of the National Economic Council attended by Vice President Kashim Shettima, state governors and other council members. Professor Amokuta's appointment, announced earlier this month, follows the completion of Professor Mahmood Yakubu's tenure. His nomination received approval from the National Council of State and was confirmed by the Senate after a screening held last Thursday.
Let me first begin by congratulating Professor Joash Amokuta on the appointment as the chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission. Your nomination for the important role and the subsequent confirmation by the Senate is a testament to your capacity and the confidence reposed in you by both the executive and the legislative arm of government. The significant achievement marked the beginning of a challenging yet rewarding journey, and I trust that you will approach your responsibilities with the highest level of integrity, dedication, and patriotism.
I'm now joined by a political scientist and former member, National Electoral Commission, Professor Adeleji Nadu. It's a pleasure to have you with us here tonight, sir. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good evening. It's nice to meet you.
Yes, indeed, sir. Prof, Nigeria's new INEC chairman, Professor Joash Amokuta, well, he's declared that election integrity is not negotiable. Yet after several election cycles, issues like logistic failures, compromised collation processes, and even enforcement of rules, well, that still persists. So from your observation, what do you see as the top 3 weakest links in INEC today? And realistically, how soon could each of those be fixed under this new leadership?
Well, let me begin by congratulating Professor Amokuta on his appointment. I'm sure he's aware that it's a very, very onerous responsibility that he's going to shoulder. And I join all other well-wishers to wish him a successful tenure as chairman of INEC. Well, I think the first important consideration for me is that the position is a very awful one. Awful in the sense that it is something that is not within the total control of the chairman and other members of the Electoral Commission. And it is not in their total control because the electoral process consists of 3 major components, within which INEC only plays some prominent part in one of them, and very, very marginal role in the other 2. The first one is, of course, that there is the task of rulemaking, and the rulemaking with regard to the electoral process lies with the National Assembly and lies with the National Assembly. Of course, some stakeholders, including INEC, have a say in that process of rulemaking. But the process essentially is one that is under the control of the National Assembly. And I include in the National Assembly, in this case, the executive branch, because the executive branch, actually, the president is the chief legislator in any federal system, because it is his bills that are passed into law, and he makes recommendations to the National Assembly on certain critical appointments which only need the confirmation. But the task of rulemaking essentially lies with the National Assembly and the executive branch, the president, because the president has to sign off to the electoral law. If he doesn't sign off to the electoral law, it doesn't become law until it is overridden, is veto is overridden by the. So the INEC has very little role to play other than a consultative one and sometimes a recommendatory, advisory one in terms of law making or rule making for the electoral process. I think we need to get that straight. The second one is, of course, rule application. And INEC has, again, an important role to play in rule application. But it's not the only agency that has a role to play in rule application. It's a very complex process. But INEC, of course, has a part to play in rule application. The third one is, of course, electoral dispute adjudication, where it has very little role to play. So you see now, if you look at that three-dimensional aspect of the electoral process, you see that the role that INEC has, although a very, very important one, is essentially with rule application. And even with rule application, it is not exactly totally in its control. So that's the first point I want to make, that we need to get clear.
Okay then, Professor. Rule making, rule application, electoral adjudication, that's what INEC faces currently, or has always. But let's take a look at Professor Amokwita's background. He comes from a strong academic background. Sir, go ahead.
No, go. I mean, there's no doubt. I mean, rule making lies with the National Assembly. They pass the law.
Okay.
INEC can have an input into it, can make recommendation, but it is the National Assembly that until and unless they pass an electoral law, it does not become operative. And the executive also has a role to play, because unless the president assents to the electoral
so INEC plays a small role. So INEC plays a small role.
In terms of rule making, yeah.
All right, sir.
Yeah,
but Professor,
especially one about advisory and consultative. Yeah.
Okay then. So I wanted to move on and talk about Amokwita's academic background. He's got a very strong one. Professor of law with decades since 1980s, legal education and governance research. But INEC's problems often stem from field-level operations like we've seen. Missing materials, poor training, ad hoc staff, gaps in result management. How can a scholar like him translate legal and governance theories into real operational reforms? Now is the big question.
You know, when you go through academic training, it's not just book. It's just you're not just a book. There's also a culture to it. Academic, scholarship has its own canons, and part of the canon of scholarship is transparency and accountability. That is very, very strong as part of our training as academics. We have our own rules, and we must, there are rules of what we call canonical rules. It prepares you for the future, not just to teach, it prepares you for the future. That wherever you find yourself, you must play that role where you find yourself with integrity, with transparency, and with respect, tolerance for others. So I think it is immaterial. It's just like politicians. What training do they need to go to? I mean, as a political scientist, I go through certain exams, through certain processes, and again, I'm certified that yes, you can now be a professor. But in the case of a chairman of an electoral commission, chairman of any organ, I mean, what kind of training prepares you for that, other than what you bring back from your own life experience? And your life experience as an academic is not limited to the university alone.
Okay.
So I think the whole concept of intellectual work implies integrity, responsibility, and honesty. So I think anybody who comes to that, but then when you are in a different environment, you can have a PhD and not be a good teacher. You can have a PhD and not be a good lecturer. You may not have a PhD and you can be a good teacher, you can be a good scholar. It depends on the personality of the person and how that person interprets the role he has to play. So I think, don't let us worry about this a professor or no professor. No, the point is that your life training, the totality of your life training, is what prepares you for the job that you find yourself in.
I do agree with you there, Professor. I do agree with you there. Let me also add that that personality also has to be tested And maybe that's what we're all looking forward to. Integrity, transparency, and tolerance, like you said. Let me add another one. Let's add independence. One of the biggest public concerns is whether INEC can truly act independently, free from executive, partisan, or even security agencies' interference. The past elections...
But you see, these are ambiguous terms. What does independence mean? In the specific context of electoral management bodies, independence has been defined in one of two ways. One, you remove the management of elections from the public service, so that INEC officials are not civil servants. They are not employed by, are not actually. So you create them out of the executive branch, and that was in fact what we did in 1987 when we came in. And we said, look, independence is defined for the electoral in the sense that it has the power to choose its own staff, to discipline them, and to promote them, and to give them assignments to do. And that is why, if you look at the law, the Constitution, before it talks of, there are some limitations to that where they are answerable to the executive branch. But independence in this context that we are talking means that in terms of recruitment, promotion, discipline of staff, INEC is independent of the civil service, of the public service. So that is the main point.
So, sir,
but also, you must know that independence is never absolute. And as I said before, there are three aspects of this: rule making, rule application, rule adjudication. So in the whole process here, INEC has to work with that. There is an interdependence between various institutions in terms of doing the process. Then the other aspect of it, of course, is that the most critical issue is the context in which INEC is operating. If that environment is toxic, if that environment is nasty, if that environment is unwholesome, it creates a lot of, it diminishes from the work they are trying to do. And that is the problem we have with elected management bodies in African countries, where a lot of infrastructural deficits are available, where you have government parties, ruling parties, not only in Nigeria, everywhere across the continent, even in the US and everywhere, ruling parties want to influence the electoral process.
Well, Prof, I really wish we could stay and take a class from you on this one, because it is becoming very interesting, and you're not just limiting it to Nigeria. It goes across Africa here. But perhaps maybe on another time we can have this robust conversation. But thank you very much, Professor Jinadu, for joining us and giving us your 2 pence on the matter here tonight. Thank you, sir. Now, coming up tonight, police arrest activist Omoyele Sowore after leading #Free Nnamdi Kanu protest in Abuja. We've got the story and more when we return. Welcome back. You're watching you're watching tonight on News Central. A reminder of our top stories: President Tinubu swears in Joash Amokuta as chairman of Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC. And police arrest human rights activist Omoyele Sowore as IPOB leader Nnamdi Kanu sacks own counsel to defend himself. Also coming up in the news tonight, Brazilian President Lula da Silva announces he will run for re-election in 2026, seeking fourth non-consecutive term. Biafra Nation agitator Nnamdi Kanu has had sacked his entire legal team. He's now resolved to defend himself. Justice James Omotosho of the Federal High Court in Abuja then ordered other members of the defense team to vacate the courtroom and invited Kanu to open his case. But Kanu objected, insisting that the court lacked the jurisdiction to try him, and argued that the federal government had disobeyed a court of appeal judgment which, according to him, ordered his acquittal. Kanu added that the laws under which he was charged had been repealed and that he was being denied fair hearing. While urging the court to void the proceedings and order his release, he also claimed that the medical report certifying him fit for trial was forged. Prosecuting counsel Adegboyega Owomolo objected to Kanu's claims, arguing that the Supreme Court had already set aside the Court of Appeal judgment the defendant relied upon.
He has decided to conduct his defense by himself. He has a right to do so. We respect that decision, and we wish him well going forward. That's all.
In a closely related development, human rights activist Omoyele Sowore has been arrested by armed policemen at the Federal High Court in Abuja shortly after attending the IPOB leader's trial. Eyewitnesses say Sowore, who led the Free Nnamdi Kanu protest that grounded Abuja on Monday, was accosted by officers who claimed that they were acting on the orders of the Commissioner of Police for the FCT. Despite demanding to see a warrant or invitation letter, he was taken away in a police van to the FCT command. Meanwhile, Force Public Relations Officer Benjamin Hundeyi has said Sowore was arrested to ensure that justice is evenly applied to everyone involved in Monday's protest, in which demonstrators allegedly entered a restricted area.
Sowore has been arrested by the Nigeria Police Force. And you would ask, why was he arrested? It is very simple. The 13 people that were arrested previously all gave their statements, and there is a constant in all of their statements. Every one of them mentioned that one Omoyele Sowore led them into the restricted area in contravention of the court order. So it will be most unfair to charge some people to court and leave the person that led them to commit that more like their leader, the lead protester who told them and took them into the restricted area. And that's why in the spirit of fair play and to ensure that justice is served, Omoyele Sowore was arrested today, and like the others too, he wouldn't spend time with us. He wouldn't spend up to 24 hours with us. Once we wrap up the charges, he's going to be prosecuted. In fact, if everything goes right, our plan is to ensure that he is prosecuted today. He goes to court today.
The Assistant Director, Army Public Relations 32 Artillery Brigade, Akure, Major Njoka Irabo, has commended the Ondo State government for its swift response to the recent security alert regarding a planned terrorist attack in some parts of the state. Major Irabo made the commendation during an official visit to the Commissioner for Information and Orientation, Ido Ajanaku, in his office in Akure. He noted that the prompt action of Governor Lucky Orimisa Ayedatiwa in convening an emergency security meeting and directing all security agencies to be on full alert demonstrated his commitment to protecting the lives and property of citizens. The Department of State Service on Wednesday alerted the Nigerian Army to an alleged plot by members of the Islamic State of West Africa province to launch coordinated attacks on communities in Ondo and Kogi states. Meanwhile, news just reaching us says Nigeria Army has dealt with Boko Haram and ISWAP that launched a coordinated attack earlier this morning on October the 23rd. Let's now turn to a former Deputy Director of the Department of State Security Service, Dennis Amakri, Dr. Dennis Amakri, as well as Ondo State Commissioner for Information, Ido Ajanaku. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. I'm being told that we only have you, Doctor, so we'll start with you. Doctor, thank you very much for joining us. Now, the DSS has warned that ISWAP may be planning attacks in Ondo, especially around Akoko and Owo. They also mentioned soft targets. So what kind of places are these soft targets? What could they be? We know of churches, markets, and schools that could be referred to as such. But why do you think they're still at risk, even after past security efforts?
Thank you very much for having me. You know, it's something that has become worrisome because, you know, when they attacked the church in Owo, and a lot of people died, and of course, they felt that they can repeat their act again. And of course, due to good intelligence work, the DSS had, you know, got that information and then, you know, sent it to the appropriate people. And of course, this morning they went into operation and I think dealt with a lot of them this early morning. So I think it was a good intelligence work. Kudos to the intelligence agency and the military for doing their job. But I want to just point out a particular area where they nearly raised some panic by leaking that intelligence from DSS that went to the 32 Artillery Brigade commander. I don't think that should have been leaked to the press, or even if it is going to be told to the press, there are ways of doing it, not to publish it in the newspaper.
So do you think that making such intelligence public helped or did not help the situation? You think that because many people would argue that it actually alerted the communities and also alerted the authorities, well, preparing them for any such or anything that might occur?
Yes, there are ways of alerting the community, but you know, the way it was used was wrong. Because if you look at the memo, it says confidential memo. And that is for the eyes of either the Commissioner of Police and then the 32 Artillery Brigade Commander. And when they get it, they know what to do. They know what to do.
Okay.
And of course, you know what the Commissioner of Police did by calling some stakeholders and talking to them.
Okay.
But he will know how to couch it. Because remember, the crowd you talk to, some of them might be double agent, nobody knows. So you have to be very careful when handling intelligence reports.
Very true, Dr. Amakri. Now, ISWAP usually operates in the northeast, but now the alert mentioned Ondo and Kogi states. So why do you think that these states are being targeted now? Are they trying to move south, perhaps, maybe because military pressure from the north, or do they see some weak spots here? Or well, 2022, that must mean that they're still operative in that area.
You know, ISWAP is actually a breakaway faction of Boko Haram. And then, of course, when they broke up, Abu al-Banawi, who is their leader, had some people who came in from Al-Qaeda, you know, to join them. And of course, listen to their name, Islamic State West Africa Province. You know, the whole idea, their objective is to create a caliphate in West Africa. And that's why they are very, very active in Cameroon, they are active in Chad, they are active in Niger. And then, of course, they try to move into Ghana, but I think Ghana dealt with them seriously because you know, the borders there are well monitored. One of our problems is the porous borders that we have. And I think we should look at that. Now they are moving southwards because, you know, the whole idea of building a West African caliphate is still there.
Well, Doctor, this warning also affects other states, and I'm wondering what suggestions or advice you have for these states. It mentioned Ondo as well, Kogi State as well. So what suggestions do you have for the governors of these states or the authorities therein?
I think this is a wake-up call for most of the governors around that axis, because they should know that this war is not something that they have to wait for the federal government to come and fight. This is a state war, and it is coming to their states, and they should take responsibility. They should take ownership. They should take ownership about it right now, just like I think the Kogi State governor did, you know, by mobilizing the Security Council and then, of course, advising them. Don't believe that idea when they say that, oh, the governors don't have powers. There are military, police, DSS, all located in each state. And the chairman of that Security Council is the governor. So they should start practicing it, at least use their security votes, and then, of course, secure their states before the federal government will come in to give them some kind of support.
Dr. Amakri, it is worrying to see the anatomy of threats change, especially as it moves down south. But we want to say thank you very much for giving us your expert opinion on the matter here this evening. Thank you very much, sir.
For having me.
You're welcome. Still ahead tonight, World Health Organization says humanitarian crisis worsens in Gaza despite ceasefire. Details of this and more after the break. Stay with us. Now, in a bid to drive impactful solutions for Africa's leadership and investment future, global industry leaders, innovators, and policymakers from across the continent have converged on Abuja for the 2025 Innovate Africa Conference, themed Reimagining Africa's Leadership and Investment Future. The annual gathering is organized by the Innovate Africa Corporation, a development organization dedicated to unlocking Africa's potential through creative, technology, and strategic collaborations. Central's Aisha Salihu here has more.
At a time when Africa stands at a crossroads between potential and paralysis, the Innovate Africa Conference has become a rallying call for transformation. Speakers from all over the continent gathered to confront some of its most pressing challenges, from rigid political power structures and fraudulent elections to an economic landscape marked by poverty and limited opportunities.
The resultant effect of all these abnormal ways of obtaining power in many African nations is that government becomes largely a private or clique affair or enterprise, where offices and positions are shared out as reward for equity investment in financial haste for the campaigns, or reward for the amount of fraud perpetrated in support of the winning candidate, and where campaigns for the next elections start a day after swearing in.
Africa is a continent of immeasurable potential, not only in natural resources that lies in the belly of Mother Africa, but in the creativity, resilience, and intelligence of its people.
Participants here believe the tide is turning. They are calling for what they describe as a power metamorphosis, a shift away from traditional centralized governance towards community ownership, decentralization, and inclusivity.
Leadership must inspire investment, both domestic and foreign, that ignites growth, creates jobs, and builds resilience. Yet, investment in Africa must not remain static, it must be productive.
Rethink how leadership is about institutions and not personal interest or gains. I believe we will look at investment in Africa differently. And that's what this whole conference is about. So reimagining leadership and reimagining how investment is done, which is our business environment, business ideas, principles, policies, framework. How are we, true leadership, changing those frameworks?
Despite the continent being richly endowed with natural resources, Africa continues to rank low on the Human Development Index and high on global poverty and corruption charts. It is believed that by rethinking leadership to reimagine investment, the Innovate Africa Conference is not just about talk, but transforming ideas into impact. In Abuja, for News Central, Aishat Salihu.
Now, the annual conference of the Chartered Institute of Directors, CIOD, enters its second day, and conversations centered on ensuring leadership continuity and long-term organizational growth. Now, under the theme Leadership that Lasts, embedding succession plan into board strategy, experts, directors, and policymakers are emphasizing the need for effective succession planning to sustain good governance and business stability. The session highlights how forward-looking board strategy can strengthen institutions, preserve corporate values, and prepare the next generation of leaders for sustainable impact. The National Economic Council has commended progress made in tackling crude oil theft across the country, say that Nigeria's daily oil production now exceeds 1.7 million barrels per day. Now, this was at the 153rd NEC meeting chaired by Vice President Kashim Shettima, which also witnessed President Bola Tinubu briefly joining the session after the swearing-in of the new INEC chairman. New Central State House correspondent Bettina Nweli here has the report.
Chairman of the NEC Ad Hoc Committee on Crude Oil Theft Prevention and Control, Governor Hope Uzodimma, briefed the Council on the progress of the committee's work, noting a steady decline in pipeline vandalism and oil asset damage.
Before 2023 May 29th, when President Bola Tinubu was sworn in as the president, our crude oil production was around 700-800 barrels a day.
In a related development, a committee chaired by Governor Peter Mba of Enugu State, with former Inspector General of Police Usman Baba as secretary, has been set up to conduct an on-the-spot assessment of the institutions.
The National Economic Council, NEC, approved President Bola Tinubu's proposal with the composition of the committee to oversee the overhaul and revamp of training institutions for security agencies nationwide.
Council also directed the Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security to establish pilot schemes on agriculture where to capture data as well as control centers in 6 geopolitical zones by 2026.
From stronger oil sector monitoring to security training reforms, the federal government says the renewed effort will strengthen national security and economic stability. In Abuja, for News Central, Bettina Nweli.
To our top story now, Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, has announced he will run for re-election next year, seeking a fourth non-consecutive term. Now, the 79-year-old was speaking during a state visit to Indonesia on Thursday, where he said he remains energized despite his age. Brazilian constitution allows presidents to serve only 2 consecutive terms. Lula, who served 2 terms in 2003 to 2010, returned to office in 2023 after 13 years out of power and thus remains eligible to run again. The Brazilian leader is currently on a diplomatic trip across Asia. After his visits to Indonesia, Lula will head to Malaysia to attend the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, that's the ASEAN Summit. While in Malaysia, Lula is expected to meet on Sunday with United States President Donald Trump, their first in-person encounter following a conciliatory phone call earlier this month. To the Middle East, as Israel keeps restricting the entry of sufficient levels of aid, Palestinian families struggle to find adequate shelter, enough food and essential water amid the destruction. Now, the World Health Organization says 15,000 Palestinians who are desperately in need of medical treatment are awaiting medical evacuation from Gaza after 41 critical patients were evacuated on Wednesday as the Rafah border crossing remains shut despite the ceasefire deal. U.S. President Donald Trump and Vice President JD Vance both came out strongly against an Israeli parliamentary vote in favor of West Bank annexation, with Trump saying it won't happen. The International Court of Justice rules Israel has an obligation as the occupying power to allow basic necessities into war-ravaged Gaza, saying it's using starvation as a method of warfare. We'll be back with business and sports and also entertainment. Do stay with us.
This segment is brought to you by MoneyPoint.
The UK Supreme Court has unanimously dismissed Process and Industrial's development appeal. affirming that the £43 million legal costs awarded to Nigeria must be paid in British pounds, not naira. The court ruled that since Nigeria paid its legal fees in sterling, the compensation should match that currency. P&ID had argued for payment in naira, citing currency conversion losses, but the court found no grounds to deviate from sterling. This decision follows earlier findings that P&ID's original arbitration award was tainted by fraud and bribery. The Budget Office of the Federation reported that Nigeria's federal government recorded a total revenue inflow of 20.98 trillion naira in 2024, marking a 68.11% increase from 12.48 trillion naira in 2023. However, this was 4.89 trillion naira below the 28.7 trillion naira annual budget estimate signed by President Bola Tinubu. Non-oil revenue surged to 16.09 trillion naira, exceeding projections by 48.91%, driven by company income tax, VAT, EMTS, and customs. Conversely, oil revenue declined by 24.65% to 15.07 trillion naira, but was still 80.83% higher than 2023. Total merchandise trade rose to 68.32% to 36.6 trillion naira in Q4 of 2024. We'll take a short break, and when we get back, we'll bring you the stock market report. You're welcome back. Let's take a look at the stock market report for today. Well, the bulls took a cautious trot on the NGX today, nudging the all-share index up by 0.49% to close at 154,489.90 points, and the market capped out at 98.05 trillion naira. Now let's take a look at what's going on in the key sectors today. Well, today, industrial goods stole the spotlight with a solid 3.09%. Also closing in the green was oil and gas at 1.13%. But unfortunately, other sectors like banking, consumer goods and insurance also closed at 1.06%. In the red, 0.94%, and insurance closed in the red as well at 1.27% respectively. So, a modest win for the bulls, nothing wild, but enough to keep spirits up as investors juggle gains in industrials against losses in banking. All eyes stay on tomorrow's trades. Well, that's all on Business Tonight. My name is Chamunda Bank. Coming up next is Udoka, the sports. Please do stay with us.
This segment is brought to you by MoneyPoint.
To the NBA now, and head coach of the NBA Portland Trail Blazers, Chauncey Billups, and Miami Heat guard Terry Rozier have been arrested for alleged involvement in illegal gambling. FBI Director Kash Patel said Billups was arrested in connection with rigged illegal poker games tied to mafia crime families. U.S. Attorney Joseph Nocella said the 49-year-old Billups, who is a former Detroit Pistons star and a member of the National Basketball Association Hall of Fame, was one of more than 30 people indicted for alleged involvement in a nationwide scheme to rig illegal poker games that used high-tech cheating technology.
Now know individuals such as Chauncey Billups, Damon Jones, and Terry Rozier were taken into custody today, former, current NBA players and coaches. What you don't know is that this is an illegal gambling operation and sports rigging operation that spanned the course of years. The FBI led a coordinated takedown across 11 states to arrest over 30 individuals today responsible for this case.
Officials were absent from the official list of referees released by the Confederation of African Football for the upcoming AFCON 2025 training camp in Egypt. CAF unveiled the list on Thursday afternoon, and it features 33 referees, 36 assistant referees, and 11 video assistant referees invited to participate in an intensive preparatory program. The training camp, which is part of CAF's build-up towards the 2025 Africa Cup of Nations, will take place in Cairo, Egypt, early in December. The tournament itself will kick off on the 21st of December, with hosts taking on Comoros at the brand new 69,000 capacity Prince Moulay Abdullah Stadium in Rabat. The final will take place at the same venue on the 18th of January 2026. Ahead of their second leg of the CAF Champions League second preliminary round against Remo Stars, Mamelodi Sundowns head coach Miguel Cardoso on Thursday confirmed several injury concerns within the squad. Sundowns thrashed the Nigerian champions 5-1 in the first leg clash in Abeokuta ahead of the return fixture on Sunday at the Loftus Versfield Stadium. Cardoso said he is facing a race against time to have his key players fit as they look to qualify for the group stage of this year's competition.
We have Zuko already training normal with the team. We have Mali that got a small injury on the ankle, as you saw. He was substituted. It's not a huge thing. He does nothing broken, and we were a little bit afraid that might be some bone question, but that isn't. So he will come back in proper time. Then we have Temba also on his, let's say, recovery process. It's not something that will be finishing.
And that's a wrap on Sports Update. I am Udoka Njoko. Entertainment is up next with Kate.
Time for entertainment now, and Kate Adiogun is bringing us entertainment. Kate, what do we have? What's happening?
In the world of entertainment.
Well, let's hear it then.
How are you doing?
I'm doing good.
Good to see you.
You too.
Now, from music charts to state leadership, Davido is stepping into a whole new kind of spotlight. The Afrobeat superstar David Adeleke, popularly known as OBO, has been appointed chairman of the Osun State Sports Trust Fund by Governor Ademola Adeleke. The move is part of the state's efforts to revive grassroots sports and build a solid funding structure for young athletes. Now, Davido, who hails from Ede in Osun State, has always shown love for his roots, from supporting education to youth empowerment programs. And Governor Adeleke described him as a symbol of youth inspiration and said his global influence could attract both private and international investors into Osun's sports sector. So from global tours to government duties, OBO is not just running stages anymore, it's now running sport affairs. But Mazino, what do you think? Should more celebrities like Davido take up government or leadership roles, or should they just stick to what they do best?
I think it's a game of numbers, and the authorities are using them to get people's support, so it's as simple as that. Well, if it works, it works. When it comes to politics, it always works.
Amazing. But let me just add, a few minutes ago, he posted some pictures of his meetup with French President Macron, sharing his vision for a better world, according to him. Now, moving on, over in the US, pop star Lizzo is making headlines again, but not for a new single. This time, she's being sued over an unreleased song. According to reports, a Vintage record label is claiming Lizzo's team used an unauthorized sample from a 1970 track during production. Now, even though the song never officially dropped, the case has once again put the spotlight on copyright issues in music production, and it also comes after her 2023 lawsuits from her former dancers, one she strongly denied. But still, this new twist has fans asking if an unreleased song can land you in court. What's next for creative freedom in the music industry? Is this a sign that artists now have to be extra cautious even when they are just experimenting in the studio, or is it just another example of how complicated music rights have become in the year 2025. And that does it on Entertainment News tonight. My name is Kate Adeogun.
And that's the news tonight. But before we go, here's a reminder of our top stories. President Tinubu swears in Joash Amokuta as chairman of Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC. And police arrest human rights activist Omoyele Sowore as IPOB leader Nnamdi Kanu sacks own counsel to defend himself. We're also told Brazilian President Lula da Silva announces he will run for re-election in 2026, seeking fourth non-consecutive term. And do remember, you can send your eyewitness report to the WhatsApp number being displayed on your screens now. And follow us on social media. We are at News Central TV across all platforms. You can watch News Central live on DSTV channel 422, GoTV channel 23, Star Times channel 274, Avo TV, and of course on YouTube. Many thanks for watching. My name is Mazino Appeal.